Activists have claimed small victories. The Alameda County District Attorney agreed to reopen its investigation into the 2009 shooting death of Oscar Grant. A BART police officer was convicted of involuntary manslaughter in Grant's death, but his family wants a second officer tried.
We're not holding our breath, but we definitely will be praying.
History has shown us that change often walks in baby steps. Santa Clara County recently declared Juneteenth a paid county holiday, and Governor Newsom signed a first-in-the-nation law to study the idea of slavery reparations for the Black community.
I hope people recognize we're moving in the right direction.
A long journey of victories and defeats, one worth marching, as long as the path is always forward.
No justice!
And part of moving forward is casting your vote. One national network is mobilizing women of color across the country to get involved. It's called She the People. Amy Allison, founder and president of She the People, joining us from Oakland this evening. Amy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And I know you said starting She the People really was to galvanize women of color to really show their power at the polls and really pushing for things that benefit them and their families, right?
Yes, I mean, after 2016's election, it was clear that women of color, Black, Latina, Indigenous, and Asian American, had a very important role both in organizing and going to the ballot box in unprecedented high numbers, and yet weren't being acknowledged for our key role. So She the People was organized to bring together women of color across the country under common values of racial, economic, and gender justice.
And since we're talking about women of color, I want to talk about some stereotypes right now, because there was a lot of talk after the vice presidential debate, and we're talking about that line that we heard Senator Harris could not cross over. That's not be too aggressive. That was watch how you talk. These are things that we're still talking about. 2020, and you thought we would be over this by now, but clearly it's something that a lot of people still feel that she has to follow this certain rule in debating for a position.
Yeah, well, Senator Harris is so competent, accomplished, and credentialed. She's ready to lead. So to be dehumanized and dismissed and sidelined is something that women of color are very familiar with as a tactic to try to silence us and to discount our leadership and power. The difference now is that women of color are coming into the knowledge, and I think the country, certainly Democrats are, but the country as a whole, that women of color are going to be the margin of victory, that we're not really accepting these kind of name calling. And maybe it's because the name calling is coming from, the highest office in the land, where we know that we can have each other's back. We have to have each other's back. We have to talk about our political power. And it's very important that we acknowledge that it's not just Kamala Harris that has to defend herself against unwarranted attacks and name calling. It's women of color everywhere in our workplaces and communities, but also who are running in record numbers up and down ballot. So we need a change in our culture, a political culture, to not be facing the kinds of challenges and name calling that would diminish our ability to lead.
Well, I think we know that women have a big voice at the polls. We can think back to the primary, and a lot of people say in South Carolina it was Joe Biden who was saved by the Black woman vote. And also in 2016, a lot of people say it was President Trump winning because of the female vote in this. But you say that when it comes to the vote of the woman, it's not just on gender, but it really does really connect with race more so.
Yeah, that's right. We have to understand that race is a stronger determinant to how people vote than gender is. I mean, the majority of white women voted for President Trump and are likely to do so in 20 days, whereas the majority of women of color across the board, in particular Black women, voted against Trump and will so in record numbers in 20 days. So when we think about the role of race, saying phrases that are, common political parlance like the women's vote, or, these things don't make sense without a deep understanding of race and the role that race plays in the complex politics, economic policies, racial justice policies, even uplifting Breonna Taylor and demanding justice as you did in the lead up. This is very important. It's very unique to women of color, and it is also very potent. And it just so happens that in this moment, people of every race and gender are united, and we saw that during the summer in calls for America to deal with its racism in all its forms. And that's a unifying a factor that are going to drive people's vote, but it's also putting the women of color in the center and really in the front of the leadership to fight for transformative change in this moment.
Well, you know, look, no matter who you are, race, gender, get out and vote. That is your biggest power right now, because we know that it is something that everyone should exercise. We have Amy Allison with us with She the People. Amy, I want to thank you so much for giving us a little insight of the organization and what people need to hear right now.
Thanks so much for having me.
Up next, we're going to talk to a deacon who is also the president of Sacred Heart Nativity Schools. What he says about systemic racism in the Catholic Church.
I'm Chris Kamara. We'd like to hear your stories and your questions, so please join us on social media and post your thoughts. We've already heard from Stephen, who weighed in on why some supporters of Black Lives Matter are saying, I take that back. Some people will say all lives. Forgive me. Stephen writes about some people saying all lives matter. What he's saying is that the police are not kneeling on the necks of all people and killing them in public. When they do, yes, we will say all lives matter. What do you think about that? What do you think about race in America? What's your take? Please let us know on the NBC Bay Area Facebook page, as well as the NBC Bay Area Twitter feed. I'll return a little later with some of what we're hearing from you. We'll be right back.
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, one of the guiding principles of the Catholic Church. But is the faith community really living those words?
We live in an institution, not only here as a local church, we have to admit that we as a country, we live within